She screamed as two security guards grabbed her arms and dragged her toward the chapel doors. "Please, let me explain," she cried. But nobody listened. The guests watched in silence. Some shook their heads. Others smirked. A few even pulled out their phones. At the front of the chapel, beneath a giant portrait of billionaire Richard Harrison, his family stood with cold expressions on their faces. Daniel Harrison, Richard's eldest son, pointed toward the exit. "Throw her out." The guards tightened their grip. Emily Carter stumbled as they forced her forward. Tears burned in her eyes. She had come to say goodbye to the only person who had ever truly cared about her. And now she was being treated like a criminal. The humiliation felt unbearable. But what nobody in that room knew was that within the next few minutes, everything was about to change. Because the dead billionaire had left behind one final secret. A secret powerful enough to destroy his family and change Emily's life forever. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us that appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the person everyone looks down on turns out to be the most important person in the room. Emily Carter had spent most of her life being invisible. At 26 years old, she worked long shifts at a small diner on the edge of the city. She wasn't rich. She wasn't connected. She didn't come from an important family. Every month was a struggle. Rent was always due. Bills never stopped arriving. Some nights, she skipped dinner just to make sure she could afford groceries later in the week. Life had never been easy. Her mother had passed away when Emily was only 16. After that, she had been completely alone. No siblings. No father. No relatives willing to help. Just Emily against the world. Yet somehow she never became bitter. She still smiled at strangers. She still helped people whenever she could. She still believed kindness mattered. Maybe that was why Richard Harrison noticed her. The first time he walked into the diner, nobody recognized him. He wore simple clothes. No expensive suit. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just an older man looking tired. Emily approached his table with a friendly smile. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" "Coffee," he said quietly. "Coming right up." That was it. Nothing special. Just another customer. Or so she thought. The next week he returned. Same booth. Same coffee. Same quiet expression. Emily served him again. Then he came back the week after that. And the week after that. Eventually they started talking. At first it was small things. Weather. Food. Funny customer stories. But over time the conversations became deeper. Richard seemed different whenever he spoke to Emily. More relaxed. More genuine. As if he could finally stop pretending. One rainy afternoon, Emily found him staring out the window. "You okay?" she asked. Richard smiled sadly. "Have you ever felt lonely even when you're surrounded by people?" The question surprised her. She pulled up a chair during her break. "More times than I can count." He nodded. "Then you understand." Over the next few months, Richard began sharing pieces of his life. Not the parts that appeared in magazines. Not the billionaire success stories. The real parts. The painful parts. He talked about how wealth had complicated everything. How people constantly wanted something from him. How trust became nearly impossible. Most shocking of all was what he revealed about his family. "My children only call when they need money," he admitted one evening. Emily frowned. "Surely that's not true." Richard laughed bitterly. "I wish it wasn't." The sadness in his eyes looked genuine. For the first time, Emily realized that money couldn't protect someone from heartbreak. It couldn't buy loyalty. It couldn't buy love. It certainly couldn't buy genuine relationships. One evening Richard arrived looking more exhausted than usual. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. Emily immediately noticed. "Are you feeling all right?" He forced a smile. "I'm getting old." "You're not that old." He chuckled. "That's kind of you." But something felt wrong. She could sense it. Richard stared at the table for several seconds before speaking. "Emily." "Yes." "If something happened to me." She immediately interrupted him. "Don't talk like that." "No. Listen." His voice was unusually serious. "If something happened to me, would you come to my funeral?" The question sent a chill through her. "Why would you ask that? Just answer." Emily looked directly at him. "Of course I would." For the first time all evening, he smiled. A genuine smile. "Thank you." She didn't understand why the question mattered so much. Not then. Not yet. A few weeks later, everything changed. Emily arrived at work early one morning. The diner felt strangely quiet. Several customers were staring at their phones. One waitress looked shocked. Another looked close to tears. Emily frowned. What's going on? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, her manager turned toward her. Have you seen the news? No. He hesitated. Then he said the words that made her heart stop. Richard Harrison died last night. The world seemed to freeze. Emily blinked. What? A heart attack? She stared at him, unable to process what she had just heard. No. I'm sorry. Her knees nearly gave out. Richard couldn't be gone. She had seen him less than a week ago. They had laughed together, talked together, planned to meet again. Now he was dead. The rest of her shift felt like a blur. Every memory replayed in her mind. Every conversation, every smile, every piece of advice. By the time she returned home that evening, she was emotionally exhausted. Then she noticed an envelope waiting outside her apartment door. Her name was written across the front. Emily opened it carefully. Inside was a formal invitation. Her eyes widened. It was an invitation to Richard Harrison's funeral. Private attendance only. Beneath the printed text was a handwritten note. Emily recognized the handwriting instantly. Richard's. Please come. No matter what happens. Promise me. Emily stared at the note for a long time. A knot formed in her throat. She whispered softly, I promise. The funeral took place 3 days later. Luxury cars filled the parking area. Politicians, executives, celebrities, powerful people from every corner of the country. Emily immediately felt out of place. Her black dress was simple, several years old, nothing compared to the designer outfits surrounding her. But she reminded herself why she was there. She wasn't there for status. She wasn't there for money. She was there for Richard. As she entered the chapel, she quietly took a seat near the back. She hoped to avoid attention. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Daniel Harrison spotted her almost immediately. His face darkened. He walked directly toward her. Several family members followed. The atmosphere shifted. Conversations stopped. Guests began watching. Daniel stopped in front of her. Who are you? Emily swallowed nervously. My name is Emily. I know your name. His tone was sharp. What are you doing here? Emily handed him the invitation. Daniel glanced at it. Then his expression turned furious. Where did you get this? It was sent to me. Liar. It's the truth. Without warning, Daniel ripped the invitation into pieces. The sound echoed through the room. Emily stared at the torn paper in shock. You have no right to be here. Richard invited me. Richard is dead. His words struck like a slap. People nearby began whispering. Daniel's sister stepped forward. A woman named Victoria. She looked Emily up and down with obvious disgust. Oh, I get it. Emily frowned. What? Victoria laughed. She's one of those women. What women? The ones who chase rich men. The accusation hit hard. Emily's face flushed. That's not true. Sure it isn't. Several relatives smirked. Daniel crossed his arms. How much were you expecting to get? What are you talking about? Money. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. I didn't come here for money. The family exchanged looks. None of them believed her. And things were about to get much worse. If you're still watching, comment karma below because what happens next will leave this entire family wishing they had never targeted Emily in the first place. The whispers spread through the chapel. Soon dozens of guests were staring at her, judging her, mocking her, assuming the worst. Emily felt her chest tighten. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to run. But she stayed. Because she had made a promise. A promise to Richard. And she intended to keep it. Unfortunately, Daniel had other plans. He turned toward 2 security guards standing near the entrance. Then he pointed directly at Emily. Remove her. The guards immediately started walking toward her. And that's when the nightmare truly began. The 2 security guards reached Emily within seconds. One grabbed her arm. Then the other. Gasps spread through the chapel. Emily's heart pounded. Please, she pleaded. I don't want any trouble. Then leave, Daniel snapped. Tears filled her eyes. She looked toward Richard's portrait at the front of the chapel. Just a few days ago, he had been alive. Now she was being thrown out of his funeral as though she were nothing. As though she had never mattered. The guards began pulling her toward the exit. Her shoes scraped against the floor. Guests watched silently. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed entertained. Victoria folded her arms with satisfaction. Good riddance. Emily lowered her head. The humiliation was overwhelming. She had spent her entire life being looked down upon because she wasn't wealthy. But this felt different. This felt cruel. The chapel doors were only a few feet away when a loud voice suddenly cut through the room. Stop! The command echoed through the chapel. Everyone froze. The guards immediately stopped walking. Daniel turned. So did every guest. Near the front stood William Grant, Richard Harrison's attorney, a man known throughout the business world for his professionalism and loyalty. His expression was stone cold. He looked directly at the security guards. "Release her." The guards exchanged nervous glances, then immediately let go. Daniel frowned. "Excuse me." William's eyes shifted toward him. "I said release her." The room became completely silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. William slowly walked forward. His polished shoes echoed against the floor. When he finally reached the center aisle, he turned toward Emily. His voice softened. "Miss Carter." Emily wiped tears from her cheeks. "Yes. Mr. Harrison specifically instructed me to ensure your attendance today." Confusion swept across the room. Daniel's face darkened. "What?" William ignored him. Instead, he addressed everyone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before this funeral proceeds, there is a matter that must be addressed." A wave of whispers spread through the chapel. Guests exchanged puzzled looks. Victoria looked annoyed. "What is this about?" William reached inside his briefcase. Then he carefully removed a sealed envelope. The sight of it immediately captured everyone's attention. Daniel frowned. "What is that?" William held up the envelope. "This contains instructions left personally by Richard Harrison." The room fell silent again. William continued. "Instructions that were to be revealed only after Miss Emily Carter arrived." Shock rippled through the crowd. Emily stared at him. She could barely breathe. What was happening? Why had Richard arranged this? William broke the seal, then unfolded several documents. After reading briefly, he nodded. As expected, Daniel stepped forward. "What does it say?" William looked directly at him. "It says the funeral cannot continue until Emily Carter is brought to the stage." The reaction was immediate. "What?" Victoria shouted. "That's ridiculous," another relative yelled. William remained calm. These were Richard Harrison's instructions. Daniel clenched his jaw. "This is absurd." William's voice hardened. "You may disagree with his wishes." He paused. "But you will respect them." For the first time all morning, Daniel fell silent. Emily stood frozen. She felt hundreds of eyes staring at her. Moments ago, they had treated her like an unwanted intruder. Now those same people looked confused, curious, nervous. William extended his hand. "Miss Carter, please come with me." Her legs felt weak, but somehow she managed to walk forward. Every step felt unreal. The same aisle she had just been dragged down now seemed completely different. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody whispered. Nobody mocked her. Instead, they watched, waiting, wondering. Fear slowly began appearing on the faces of Richard's family. Something wasn't right, and they could feel it. When Emily reached the front, William guided her to a seat beside him. Then he looked toward the audience. "There is one more thing." He reached into his briefcase again. This time he removed a flash drive. Daniel's stomach visibly tightened. "What is that?" William answered immediately. "A recorded message from Richard Harrison." The room exploded with murmurs. A final message. Nobody had expected that. William handed the flash drive to a technician. Within moments, a large screen illuminated behind the stage. The image flickered. Then suddenly Richard Harrison appeared. The room instantly fell silent. Several guests gasped. Emily felt tears forming again. Seeing him on the screen made his death feel real all over again. Richard looked older than she remembered. Tired, but peaceful. He stared directly into the camera. Then he smiled. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone." The room remained motionless. Richard continued. "I spent my life building businesses." A pause. "I spent decades accumulating wealth." Another pause. "And yet the greatest lesson I ever learned had nothing to do with money." His eyes became serious. It had everything to do with people. Several members of his family shifted uncomfortably, almost as if they sensed where this was heading. Richard continued. "I made many mistakes in my life." His voice softened. "But perhaps my greatest mistake was believing success would bring my family closer together." Daniel's expression hardened. Victoria looked away. The guests listened carefully. Richard sighed. "The truth is painful." He paused again. "But truth should never die with a man." The room grew even quieter. Many of the people sitting in this room today stopped caring about me years ago. Gasps erupted. Daniel's face turned red. Victoria looked horrified. Richard continued anyway. "They called when they needed money. They visited when they wanted favors. They remembered my birthday only when cameras were present." Nobody moved. Nobody dared interrupt. For years, Richard had remained silent. Now, even in death, he was finally speaking freely. Then his expression changed completely. A small smile appeared. But there was one person who treated me differently. Emily's heart stopped. She already knew who he meant. Richard looked directly into the camera. Emily Carter. Every head in the room turned toward her. She froze. Richard smiled. Emily never cared who I was. His voice cracked slightly. She never asked for anything. Never requested money. Never tried to impress me. Never expected anything in return. Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks. The room remained silent. Richard continued. She listened. She cared. And she reminded me what genuine kindness looks like. Several guests lowered their eyes. Because deep down, they knew Richard was telling the truth. Then his smile disappeared. The next words changed everything. There is something else you need to know. The tension became unbearable. Nobody breathed. Nobody blinked. Richard leaned closer to the camera. Several months before my death, I discovered a secret. Emily felt her pulse racing. A secret hidden for more than 25 years. Daniel frowned. Victoria looked confused. Richard continued. Many years ago, before my businesses became successful, I fell in love with a woman named Sarah Carter. Emily froze. The world seemed to stop. Sarah Carter. Her mother. The room erupted into whispers. Richard continued. We lost contact. His voice trembled. And I never knew she was pregnant. Emily's entire body went numb. No, she whispered. Richard looked directly into the camera. By the time I discovered the truth, Sarah was gone. Tears filled his eyes. But she left behind the greatest gift I never knew existed. The room held its breath. Then came the moment that changed everything. Emily Carter is my daughter. Absolute silence. Complete shock. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed capable of breathing. Emily stared at the screen. Her mind refused to process what she had just heard. Daughter. Richard Harrison was her father. The words echoed endlessly. Then chaos erupted. What? Daniel shouted. Impossible. Victoria screamed. Several relatives jumped to their feet. Guests gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others stared at Emily in disbelief. William raised his hand. Please remain seated. Nobody listened. The chapel exploded with confusion. Emily sat frozen. Tears streamed down her face. Every memory of growing up without a father came rushing back. Every birthday. Every lonely night. Every question she had never been able to answer. Now she finally knew. Richard continued speaking from the screen. I conducted multiple DNA tests. The room quieted slightly. The results were conclusive. Daniel's face turned pale. Richard continued. Emily is my biological daughter. There was no denying it. No arguing. No escaping it. The truth had been confirmed. Then came the final blow. Richard looked directly into the camera. If you're hearing this, William is about to read my final will. The entire family stiffened. Everyone knew what was coming. And they were terrified. Richard smiled one last time. Emily. Her eyes locked on the screen. If life had given us more time together, I would have told you myself. His voice trembled. I am proud of the woman you've become. Emily began sobbing. You are kind. You are strong. And you are everything I could have hoped for in a daughter. The room watched silently. Even some guests were crying now. Richard smiled gently. I love you. Then the video ended. Darkness filled the screen. Silence consumed the chapel. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew how to react. William slowly stood, then opened another folder. His expression was calm, professional, yet even he seemed emotional. He cleared his throat. Richard Harrison's final will and testament. Every eye turned toward him. The next few seconds would determine everything. William began reading. Several charitable donations, scholarship funds, employee benefit programs. Then he reached the final section. The most important section. The inheritance. Daniel leaned forward. Victoria gripped her chair. Every relative listened carefully. William took a breath, then spoke. The majority ownership of Harrison Global Enterprises. A pause. Along with Richard Harrison's personal assets, investments, properties, and controlling shares. Another pause. Shall pass to my daughter, Emily Carter. The room exploded. Chaos. Pure chaos. Relatives shouted. Daniel slammed his fist onto a chair. Victoria burst into tears. Several family members began arguing immediately. But none of it mattered. Because the decision was final. The billionaire's fortune now belonged to the waitress they had just thrown out. The same woman they had mocked. The same woman they had humiliated. The same woman they had treated like garbage. Karma had arrived, and it had arrived all at once. Before we continue, hit that like button if you believe people should never judge others by their appearance. Over the following weeks, the story dominated headlines. The waitress who inherited a billionaire empire. The secret daughter nobody knew existed. The family who lost everything after trying to throw her out of the funeral. The public couldn't stop talking about it. But Emily surprised everyone. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't humiliate Richard's family. She didn't use her new wealth to settle scores. Instead, she focused on honoring her father's memory. She expanded employee benefits, created scholarships, helped struggling families, opened support programs for single mothers, and every decision reflected the kindness Richard had admired in her. Months later, Emily stood beside her father's grave. Fresh flowers rested in her hands. The evening was quiet, peaceful. For a long moment, she simply stood there, thinking, remembering, missing him. Then she smiled through tears. "You changed my life." The wind gently moved through the trees. "I just wish we'd had more time." She placed the flowers beside the headstone, then looked toward the sky. "Thank you, Dad." For the first time since his death, she felt peace. Because despite all the money, despite all the headlines, despite all the drama, the greatest gift Richard Harrison had left her wasn't his fortune. It was the truth. And sometimes the truth changes everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Also comment below. If you were Emily, would you forgive the family after everything they did, or would you walk away forever? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, never underestimate someone simply because they appear ordinary. You never know who they really are, or what destiny is waiting for them.